Chat, enable waiting room. Okay. Zoom. Zoom is a bane of our existence, isn't it? There's Asma again trying to join. Please work this time. Please work. Asma, we can see you.
I can
and
hear
we
you.
can hear you. Yay! Okay,
Yes.
that's all
Oh
that
my
matters.
God.
Fantastic. Welcome, Asma. Welcome, and thanks for.
I'm so sorry about this. I have no idea what
No,
happened because
it's
I've
not
never
your
had this.
fault. It's probably on our end, but I think it's sorted itself out because
Okay,
other people
great.
had the same issue, and we have people joining. So I'm going to leave it with Salma and yourself. Please carry on.
Great.
And welcome.
Asma. So good to see you.
Finally can actually hear you. I'm so sorry about all this. It was just a nightmare.
Not at all. We're so excited to have you with us and to have a chance to talk with you. So we'll just dive right in. Just a brief introduction. I'm sure everyone on this call knows Asma Khan, the founder of Darjeeling Express, the must-dine hotspot in London. I actually tried to get reservations, Asma, before we knew each other. We were in London during December holidays, and impossible, of course, too. But now that we're friends, Asma, I'm going to text you next time we're in London.
Let me know in advance, please. Yes.
Absolutely. The first British chef to be on Chef's Table. I hope all of you have seen this. Sahib was saying he just watched it again yesterday. It's such an amazing, amazing episode. Such beautiful storytelling. You know, I'm a storyteller, so your story is just magic. There's so many levels to it. There's so many layers to it, and I'm really excited to uncover some of them this morning with you. Asma, you were voted Female Entrepreneur of the Year by the Asian Restaurants Award. You're a best-selling cookbook author, Asma's Indian Kitchen, and the accolades and achievements go on and on. It's, mashallah, amazing what you have achieved. So I think, maybe I'll just start with when you arrived in Cambridge. I think it was 1991. You had an arranged marriage, I understand, and you came from Calcutta to Cambridge. You talk about what a lonely, desolate time it was. Very difficult. I mean, the cold weather, the isolation, so different from the home and life and vibrancy of India that you grew up in. And I just wonder, you decided to pursue a degree in law, and you went on to get a PhD in British constitutional law. So, and you say that you didn't know how to boil an egg at that point. So I'm just wondering, did you want to pursue law? Was that your passion? That's why you studied so hard and for so many years to get a PhD. You were the first woman in your family to go to college, and certainly the first woman to get a PhD. Was that where you wanted to head? And if you didn't know how to cook or even boil an egg at that point, how did you divert to this amazing path that you're on now? Please tell us.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm glad that this has all worked out. Technology is not as great as people often talk about it as being this kind of infallible thing. It does have hiccups. When I met my husband in Calcutta, it was one of those things, I met him and we got married within a few months. It was very traditional arranged marriage. But the thing was that he was not very traditional, because when I asked him what happens about food and didn't want to kind of tell him at that point I didn't know how to cook, he told me, I'm a very liberal, very, very laid back person. He said, I don't believe in these gender roles of men and female, and that the female will cook. And I'm not expecting you to come and cook in Cambridge. I'll cook, I'll look after you. You don't bother to learn to cook if you don't know how to cook. Oh, great. I'm going to have a dawat. This guy is going to look after me, take care of me. What he didn't say is that he's a very, very average cook. I mean, beyond average. And his rice is like glue. And he just knew one thing. And the year that I got married to him and moved to Cambridge, he was admissions tutor at the college and graduate tutor, and he ended up eating all his meals in college or on high table, and leaving me with this one chicken curry he cooked for me and this glue of rice. And it was really hard because so I didn't cook for a long time because I had no idea how to even start. I never cooked anything, really, literally nothing. So I struggled a lot, but I studied law a little later, by which time I had learned how to cook.
Mhm.
And in fact, we have a mutual friend, Rufi,
Yes,
who
we do.
was my husband's PhD student.
Yes.
And she would cook food for me because I didn't know how to cook.
She's a very good cook.
She's a very good cook, and she used to cook for me. So I eventually made friends. Happened to be, my husband's PhD students, and then some other, students. And life got a lot better, and I managed to eat some home cooked food. And then one day I kind of realized, I was outside someone's house who was making paratha. I cried, and I realized that, in that kind of aroma of paratha, especially when that ghee is burning that bread, when the dark spots happen, that moment took me home. And that was incredible because I realized then that, I cannot do anything about who I'm married to, what my situation is, that Cambridge is such a cold, damp place. And I missed family a lot. And this is 30 years ago. 30 years ago, there was no internet, and you couldn't call home. There was no WhatsApp or Viber. So now when people tell me, I miss home, you can Viber your dog. You can WhatsApp your dog and talk to them in Delhi.
Yes.
I had to write letters. So it was very, very isolating, very hard. And, then being, I'd never in my life eaten a meal alone till I'd come to Cambridge. So it kind of really was so different. And my husband was very different from me. And that's this, I think a lot of people who've had arranged marriages can relate to, especially if the other person has had a very different upbringing from you and may not understand or pick up sorrow and pain. And I don't want to tell him I was so unhappy because I was scared that he would see this as an indictment of him.
Right.
But I was really, really lonely, and I felt kind of bereft, totally.
So you started these supper clubs. When was that you started? And I just want to ask you, Asma. You're a very open person, which I love about you from watching the show and just the couple of interactions that we've had. And I feel I can sort of ask you these open and perhaps personal questions, but I wonder, how did your family feel? I mean, you pursued this law degree, achieved such tremendous academic achievement, and then you decided to cook and go into cooking. And as you say, follow a profession, or at least a passion, that women who are not afforded the education do. So how was that with your family? Were they supportive?
It was uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It was uncomfortable because I think that everyone was very proud of me studying law, that I did a PhD, and they took, this was a very big thing for a lot of my younger female cousins as well, who could see that, because I had done so well, they also may be able, they may not have an arranged marriage at 18. They may actually be allowed to go to college. So, I was this kind of big figure in the family as someone who'd achieved a lot. But nothing that I did in the law degree. I enjoyed doing my PhD. You cannot finish a PhD unless you're enjoying it. It is brutal, but anyone who's done a PhD will understand this, that you need to love what you're doing, otherwise you can't finish. And I enjoyed my PhD, but it gave me no joy. And what really made me happy was watching other people eat. But what really helped me, my husband was very against me cooking, really, really bitterly opposed.
Why?
What I wanted to do with food.
Why?
Because actually this was to do with, not because he was traditional, but he wanted me to make a difference to other people. He knew what my politics was. He knew how I felt about helping other women. He knew how important my faith was, that I wanted to do things in my own community to help Muslim women out who had been facing domestic violence. I was trying to help them out, for younger girls to kind of convince parents to let them go to college. And all of these things, he said, how are you going to do any of this by cooking? Stay a lawyer, become a lawyer, go teach, research, do anything, Asma. You will never achieve anything by cooking. How wrong he was.
Yes.
But then there was no one like me at that time. Today, if someone wants to say, I want to start a food business, I want to use this as a platform for politics, I want to talk about power and race. I want to talk about religion and faith and immigration. I'm going to use the restaurant as my base on which I will actually set up a social enterprise and empower women. No one will blink an eyelid. They say, oh yeah, like Darjeeling Express. When I wanted to do it, there was no one who looked like me, who sounded like me, who had a name like me, who did anything like food and politics. So it was a path no one had taken, but I would dream it at night. I would dream that I would make a difference. I would use food as a bridge. I would shatter the ceilings and get somewhere in life that I knew no one who looked like me had done it. But the other thing is that all the hurdles I hit, starting from my own family, I knew I was removing these hurdles, not for myself so much, but for the women who were coming behind me. I was removing the hurdles for those who could then follow their dreams, because I wanted to be that success story, not for myself. I wanted desperately to succeed so that a woman could stand up to her family, go into a bank and say, see that? I'm going to surpass her. I want women to be able to go in to landlords' offices and say, that is Darjeeling Express. I'm going to be her boss. I'm going to do so well. You know, that belief that I want women to do better than me. I'm clearing the path for them. And at that time, I saw this as my destiny, that I could do this. And finally, you know, I come from a Rajput warrior clan. And, you know, you hear these stories of bravery. But for me, this was my battle. I was a warrior. I was going to win, not for myself, but for my qawm. I was going to do something that would open the doors for other women, where maybe they didn't have the kind of husband I had or the opportunities. I was living at Cambridge, was surrounded by academics. They may not get a chance to do law, but they all can cook. I couldn't cook, but I learned. But this could be their passport to freedom, to independence, to financial independence. And I did the cooking more as a weapon to break the chains of women of my community.
Amazing, amazing. So you knew all along that food and cooking was this tool of empowerment for women.
Absolutely.
Take us through your journey, because there are so many twists and turns and so many, I don't want to say lucky breaks, but moments that, you know, were pivotal in taking you to the next step, and people who just believed in you. And first of all, you believed in yourself. I think it's amazing. You exude such a sense of confidence, and if you could sort of bottle and package and cook that, I would love to have some of that. But if you could just take us through your journey, your entrepreneurial journey. Tell us.
So I had no money, and I knew that I wanted to cook. I began from the house because I had a neighbor who lived above me, and he mentioned something about a supper club, and it is an underground restaurant, and you do call people in your house. And I thought, great, this is a dawat. I can do this like with my eyes closed. So let me start here. And, you know, I had an aunt who gave me 50 pounds as Eidi. And I went and bought a slightly bigger pot, and that was my sole investment. I have built my business on 50 pounds that my aunt had given me. And I bought a pot, and I used everything that I had in the house. I began a supper clubs, and I thought, you know, why, you know, you should never go into battle where you know you may lose. So with my husband, it was going to be a battle where I told him, you know, I'm going to do the supper clubs in your house. He's an academic, introvert, likes students, doesn't like people. So there was no way he was going to allow 20 or 40 strangers in his house, walking on his lovely carpet, eating the food from his dining table. I mean, he would have freaked. I think most people would have freaked. So I thought, I'm not lying. Allah forgive me. I'm just going to tell him, you know. So I waited till he left, and I thought he's gone away on a trip. Let me just do this, and then I won't tell him. So I didn't tell him. And so it worked very well without his knowledge. House was very clean when he came back every time.
Can I just ask, what year is this? Are you
so
done?
This is 2012.
Okay.
So 2012 to 2015, I did this in my house. Every time he traveled, I did a supper club, series of supper clubs. And in 2015, my kids got older. Somehow they knew that this was not something you should tell Baba. So even though I hadn't asked them to lie, because then you lose all credibility. You can't ask your kids to lie. They'll lie to you your whole life after that. But my kids are very, very sensitive and they're very good kids. And they never told him. And he never asked because it's something he wouldn't even imagine can happen. And when he goes away, that, I have this party in my house when he goes away. So it never occurred to Mushtaq to, even ask me what was happening when he was away. And then the kids protested. They told Abu. And then I had to stop because they made me realize that I had behaved like a patriarch. I had imposed my will on this house without asking them their opinions. I had dismissed them the way that women are dismissed, that girls are dismissed in my family, where your opinion is not asked. The patriarch makes a decision, and I had done that. I was very ashamed of myself. I was also heartbroken because I realized that my journey was ending. This whole joy of feeding people. Without any kind of money, where would I go? I told this to a friend, and she then said that, go to my husband. He's a manager of the pub. I went in there. Everybody looked like aging rock stars, tattooed, pierced men with Harley Davidsons outside. I thought, my God, I'm terrified to even pass these guys. They're never going to buy my food, and they didn't. So when I started doing the pop-up in the restaurant, in the small kind of restaurant area of the pub, no one wanted to eat my food. When I would go to them and give them free samples, including samosa, who doesn't want to have a free samosa?
Absolutely. These
These guys would tell me, oh no, no curry, love. We don't want your curry, no curry, love. It was so hard. There were nights where we sold nothing, nothing. And it was complete failure. But what I believed in was myself. Every night when I didn't sell anything, we gave it to the homeless, the food. I never took it. That I would not be defeated. In some ways, I saw this as service. So I could not serve anyone on my table because they didn't come to my table. I served the poor and the destitute. I sent food to homeless people, but I also sent food to families like in bed and breakfast, refugees. And I did that. So my food never got wasted. And this gave me the joy that, I'm feeding them now, and their duas, maybe I will become something one day. So I did that for a while. But what changed everything is that someone came, she's, one of our most respected food critics. She writes for the Evening Standard, 70-year-old Faye Mashler, came and celebrated her birthday in my pub. And then 3 days later wrote an incredible review. There were queues for people to eat my food, including the no curry love, who stood for 2 hours for a table. I never billed him, but he knows why. I could not, his money I didn't want. I was grateful for the fact that his realization that he had done me wrong. And the whole point is that, people do hurt you, sometimes deliberately, sometimes unknowingly. The whole point is that it is part of our faith as well. You must forgive. This is the only way you will survive. I didn't hold it to heart. I kept faith every time. I saw myself, my name in lights. I saw myself as something, not because of arrogance, but because I knew that if I don't make it, I will not be able to help everybody else. I had to succeed so I could then help everybody else. So it was not the weight of my personal loss or gain. I felt I had to do this for all the women who I knew could cook, and this was their gateway out of oppression, abusive marriages, and all kinds of difficulties that they had. If I could hire them, if I could become something, I could break their chains too.
Where does this come from, Asma? This incredible self-assurance, this sense of confidence, this belief in yourself. Where is that emanating from? I mean, you talk about being a second daughter, right?
Yeah.
And about how your mom cried when you were born, and how you were belittled because of the situation that you weren't born a son.
Yeah.
And that would make anyone feel less than and shy away from and feel, not confident. But you are the exact opposite. Is it because of that you have used that as a way to just champion people's rights and women's rights and, stand up for yourself and believe in yourself? I'm just trying to understand where this is coming from. It's so inspiring.
I think that, what made a huge difference, you see, Ammu did cry when I was born. She's one of 5 daughters. She understands the grief and the pain because she watched, 2 other daughters being born after her. She was number 3. And I think that, she did weep. She was upset. I think that, my grandmother was most angry that she had not delivered a boy. My grandmother, who had delivered 5 girls herself, felt, in some ways completely, very let down by my mother. But what I think made a big difference is that Ammu, when my brother was born 3.5 years after me, there was no celebration at all. And this is very unusual in our culture. You do distribute sweets, but after you have 2 girls and a boy, definitely. I'm talking about 47 years ago. The culture then in India, in Hyderabad, people were like, wow, she's had finally had the heir to the family. And Amma didn't celebrate at all. But when I remember when I went in to see her, I didn't see any sense of triumph. She was more concerned that, I should not be harassing my father because my father was looking after me because she was in hospital. And her concerns were just about my welfare and my being. And then she didn't distribute anything. And people were asking me that, oh, did you have a sister, when I went back? And I said, no, I had a brother. They said, how come there's no celebration? And that left a huge mark on me. I realized that, my mother, in an unspoken way, had told me I mattered. It made me feel very, very, very powerful suddenly that I was seen as equal to a boy, which, I did have a hard time when, being a second daughter, being dismissed. I felt it my whole childhood. But that moment of feeling that someone else had believed in me, I think it left a very deep mark in me. Ammu had shown solidarity with me, and she had shown, that she believed I was equal. And I thought my entire life, I'm going to make sure, I'm not going to tell people that, I think you're great and this, that, the other. I'm going to make them feel equal to me. That was my aim. The same way Ammu made me feel equal to a boy and very loved and on par with anyone else. I think that really, I think back a lot, and I often remember that moment when Arif was born. And Arif has always been treated equal as to me. He's a lovely kid, and poor guy, I think he's too many girls in the family. He's just been, he's always towed the line and been very sweet. And I think that I realized that it doesn't take a lot out of you to make someone else feel honored and valuable. But to that person, it can be life-changing. And that is what I'm doing. I realize that if the stronger I get, the more powerful I get, the bigger I get, the more well-known I am, I will use this. I will rise by lifting others. And because I know that this can be life-changing, it changed my life. I became a person who believed that I could make a difference, that I was equal, I was powerful, and that I could do anything I wanted. Just that small gesture by my mother, I think that really had a big impact on my life.
Amazing, amazing. I'm feeling more empowered just talking to you, Asma, just on this call. So you have an amazing energy and just a sense of empowering people in your presence. So keep going. I have to ask you one thing, Asma, that talking so openly about how your mom felt, even though when your brother was born, you talk about how you felt differently, but this is something that we don't really do in our society or in our culture, be so open about these kinds of issues. They're kind of hush-hush, secrets in the family. And when I saw your episode of Chef's Table, this was a year ago or so, that really struck me that, wow, this is pretty bold, of you to say so openly for everybody, for the whole world to hear how your mom felt or whatever. How was that? I mean, how did your mom feel when you said that? And
I was worried because I said it in an interview because I decided that, when I realized what Chef's Table was, and the fact that I was getting a chance to be, to tell my story, I decided that I was going to be very honest and talk about everything. Because the thing is that this was my opportunity, because even though it's my voice and my face, I am every South Asian woman who was made to feel they were not good enough. I'm every South Asian woman who's cooking in the kitchen, whereas in every Indian restaurant, Pakistani restaurant, when you go to the West, it's a man cooking. I'm that face of a woman who never got thanked, who was never valued, whose inner voice was never ever allowed to dictate that I don't want to do this and I want to do this in my life. I was all of that, and I could only be that if I opened my heart. I let it bleed, I let the scars show. Not because I was trying to be dramatic or anything. I needed to show my vulnerability. I needed to strip everything out bare so that the women who saw themselves in me had the courage to see they could become me. Mm-hmm. That they could, with their scars and all the insecurities and the chains that they have tied to themselves. Often women do that they tie themselves down in chains because they think this is their destiny. I wanted them to know you can fly, but I needed them to know that I've been through this journey. I'm not just this successful face. I don't only talk about my success. I talk about the pain and the grief and the journey, because I saw this as an opportunity to tell a story. Mm-hmm. A story has to be something you can relate to. And I wanted people to relate to me. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want them to feel, or them to judge my mother either, because, it's very clear my mother has been an incredible influence on my life. She taught me how to cook. She actually, I think definitely I am her most favorite child. I'm most like her. And I knew that I hadn't told Ammu that, I hadn't seen the edit, still the last bit. And I didn't have the courage to tell her that this was going to be in the film. When she started seeing it, because of course, my parents had to get someone else to connect Netflix and all of this, because they're in a small town in Aligarh, they don't have all of this. Right. So when she started seeing it, I waited, and then I called her and I said, Ammu, what did you feel? And she said, I was so upset. Oh. And my heart broke, and I was so thin. And she said, I was so upset you didn't comb your hair. I was like, and she said, you were walking in the mazar with your dupatta in the kichar. Didn't anyone tell you that your hair was looking so awful? I said, I was so shocked, but this is my mother. She gave me a 5-minute lecture on how my dupatta had scraped the floor and it will be ruined completely because it's chiffon, and that my hair looked awful, and why these people, she's saying, there were 16 Americans over there filming you. Didn't anyone tell you your hair was looking so awful?
That's
and I said, did you see the bit where I said, I thought she might have missed it. I said, you said? She said, ha, beta, it hurt. But it's okay that you said it. And we've never discussed it again.
Wow.
So, actually, my mother is an incredibly powerful woman who never had that moment on the stage that I have had. I have had the spotlight on me. I've had my chance to say my lines. I have that opportunity like now to speak to you. All these opportunities I have got, Ammu never had. Yeah. And there are people like Ammu around the world, women who were voiceless. I have to be their voice. But I also wanted to be the voice of those girls who are scarred and have crawled through life feeling they were inadequate, feeling that they always had to give in to their husband's demands, give in to their adult son's unreasonable behavior, because they know that they feel somewhat that they are inferior. And it is actually deeply damaging, not just for us, it's also damaging for boys, because in a family where there are large families, boys who see the birth of their sisters being lamented feel superior to that girl, but they feel superior to all women. When they see people who they trust, like their mother, your nani, your dadi, bigger problem is dadi in most cases. When the mother-in-law laments the birth of a girl, it is actually so damaging. But I want to tell my story that, from that damage comes strength. From that damage comes power. Too many of our girls, like candles, have been blown out, their entire destiny, because they were made to feel undervalued. Yeah. And this insecurity they carry for life. And they don't have to do that.
Yes. Yes. Just your mom was also in the cooking business, right? She had a
Yes,
catering.
yeah, she was.
I just want to know, when she first walked into Darjeeling Express, what was her reaction? What is her reaction seeing you as this world-renowned chef? She must feel so incredibly proud.
She was very proud because, I think that she said that, you have completed every dream that I would not dare have dreamt for myself. She says, today you have made it all come true. And my father, which is very unusual for the fact that, he's Rajput and boys are seen. He says, Beta, you have got honor to our clan.
Oh.
And it was just so moving because for them, this is just a fulfillment of not my dream, but of their dreams as well. That they never even realized it was important for them to see their daughter, do this. But they never differentiated between me and my brother. So I think any child, they would have been equally proud. But I think because I did it, a little bit more special because Ammu always saw herself in me in lots of ways. In her attitude to life, in her deep sense of commitment, in her deep spirituality, both my parents. People are surprised because they see me and they say, are you religious? Are you this? I don't need to explain my spirituality and my faith to anyone. It's a very personal relationship between me and Allah. And I don't need to tell anyone what I feel. I try to follow the path that I should. And this is what has made my parents proud, that they knew that a lot of what I do is driven by my belief and faith in wanting to help other people. And it was them who taught me all these values.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the women who work in your kitchen. Who are these amazing women, and how did you come to form this all-women team of folks who cook with you?
Well, I mean, I can obviously now, I could always say, oh, I always wanted to have an all-female kitchen. No, it wasn't that. I needed to have people to help me who knew how to cook my style, with andaz, without estimates. I could not have, men who've cooked and learned to cook in culinary school and in Taj hotels and Oberois to come and ask me, the measurements of, not a single thing is measured in my kitchen. Everything is by estimate. So these women were just nannies I'd met in school. I live in an area which is predominantly French, and they were looking after your families. I lived in nannies. I knew that they couldn't possibly be cooking their food, that they were eating family food. So I invited them to my house. I said, come and eat samosa, come and eat chai. I have chai, have, mithai. And they started coming earlier, to pick up the kids from school. And it was a friendship initially. Then I told them about my idea for a supper club. They said, we will come and help you. Some of them have never cooked meat in their lives. They come from very different backgrounds. But they helped. And we all kind of, formed a kind of a really strong bond. And all the supper clubs, they helped me. When I went to the pub, they were helping me. Of course, when I went to the restaurant, they came along with me. And I don't know at what point anyone learned how to make shami kebab or shikampuri kebab, or they learned to make korma, or lachhedar paratha. Somewhere along the line, just like you learned from your mother and grandmother, they learned watching me. And they learned the food, and they now cook it. And I'm very proud of them. And this is a friendship that, if I was in India, I would never even met them.
Exactly. We have about 13 minutes or so, and I want to let people on the call ask questions if they have any, so please add them to the chat. There's one question that asks about your work with charity organizations. If you can talk a little bit about that. I know that you're doing something very special in the next couple of days.
Yes.
Tell us about that and some of your other work with charity organizations.
So I've always, especially over Ramadan, I've always distributed iftar to mosques, to students, to the homeless, but also I've always sent food to hospitals since I started. And then, obviously what we are facing right now is an incredible challenge for everyone who's in medicine. And a lot of, chefs are cooking for them, but I'm doing iftar in 2 days' time for 2 entire hospitals, everybody who's fasting, who's not fasting, because I never discriminate between people who fast and don't fast, because for some people, they're hungry for different reasons, not faith. The homeless on the street who may have a problem with addiction, I will not judge anyone, because I will also one day be judged. I should be very careful how I judge people. So iftar, I've always distributed to the homeless, because it's important for me. For me, it is about hunger, and for many families here in this country, especially for the refugee families in bed and breakfast, the children go to sleep not full. And so Ramzan is an opportunity to distribute food. So I will be distributing food to over 250 people. We're packing chaat, and I'm making prawn malai curry. I'm doing all my favorite things. So for iftar, I have to give what I would be delighted to receive. So I cook all the things that I enjoy, but I've also, in the past been working, and I have set up a restaurant in a Yazidi camp for women who survived, being enslaved by ISIS. And I do work in a lot of female organizations to empower women. I also tried, and when my restaurant was open, I would open the doors of my restaurants every Sunday to any aspiring cook who wanted to open a restaurant. When we were small, we used to play shop and play restaurant. We used to pretend to play with our siblings. Here they can come and pretend to play restaurant. What I want, and I give it to them for free, what I want them to do is I want them to understand they can do it. So, otherwise, if you have to rent and pay something, women are scared, What if no one wants to eat my food? What if no one wants to come? If I have to pay you 500 or 2,000 pounds, whatever, places are expensive. So I give it to them for free. I cover all the costs, because for me, I want to see a lot more women doing what I do and doing better than me. So a lot of my charitable work is driven by trying to lift women up, but also to inspire them, to fund them, to try and set up, a kind of collective of mentoring people. Like I am not very good with finance, but I have friends who are good. So I've got them along on board, and they give financial advice. So, in some ways, when the doors don't open, you push it really hard. But to push it really hard, you need more than one person. So I don't want women to struggle on their own. I want them to understand, get more people on board and push and push. You bring down not just the doors or break the glass ceiling, you bring the whole edifice down. Then it'll be open for all of us to occupy the space. That is what we have to do. So everything that I do is driven by that.
Absolutely. Amazing. So Salma Hamed on the call says, Asma for PM. Yes. And Salma's daughter, Inaya, asks this: what advice would you give to young female aspiring chefs?
The biggest thing is that you should try and be as open as possible to every kind of influence. Try and be an intern, ask for people for advice. You'll be surprised how willing people are to help you. Try to learn as much as you can when you are young, because that is really important, And the other thing is that build your networks from now. Don't wait till you are in your 40s and 30s and think networking is a dirty word. Networking is a dirty word because it's used by men to hang around in the pub after work, and this excludes women. Networking for me is a positive thing. Reach out to people who you think you can help, and look for people who can help you. Learn to be open about your fears. This is all the things when you're young, you can do it. I wish I had done this when I was younger. I mean, I started my business when I was 40, 45, in my late 40s. Wow. It's okay. I'm fine. I'm going to, I still made it. But when you're young and you have the opportunities, go for it, and push yourself as hard as you can. Every time you fall, lift yourself up thinking, this is a lesson I've learned, and I'm moving this barrier for the other person who's coming. I'm going to make sure she knows not to do this. So every defeat of yours, turn it into a victory for someone else that they didn't even lose. Then get something positive out of it. Spend your life trying to learn at a young age.
Inaya, thank you for that question. And Asma, thank you for that inspiring answer. There's one more question. What more do you think restaurants can do to help with changing misconceptions of Muslim-owned restaurants?
It's a very tough place to be a Muslim restaurateur because it's those restaurants, especially in this country. I know that a lot of other countries as well, where their Indian food is cooked. It's a very kind of closed kitchen. They're all men, and the reputation they have is of cheap and cheerful. And the problem is our food is not cheap and cheerful. Please do not degrade the food that your nani and dadi cooked, that your grandmothers cooked, as cheap and cheerful, oily, slick food that you serve for very little money. This is not what our cuisine is about. You must serve the food as it is sacred, with honor, with respect. And this is a huge lesson we need to learn, because a lot of Muslim owned restaurants don't actually tell their stories because they never heard them. Mm-hmm. They learn to cook not by women. They haven't learned from women. They haven't learned, their mothers haven't held their hands and taught them how to stir the keema, that you break each lump up. That is the important thing. Then that keema is something more. It'll have memories. Food without memories is what they're serving, a lot of restaurants. I'm not trying to paint everybody with the same brush. Of course, there are people who are doing it different. But this is not, you are presenting. I say this to everybody. When I serve you my food, I serve you my entire heritage. And I will not let you hate me, call me names because of my religion, the color of my skin, and my accent. You eat my food, you honor my food. And then, if you want to get off the table and still disrespect me, I will forgive you because that's my faith. But I want you to eat my food with respect, with the same respect with which I serve you. I think a lot of Muslim restaurants don't do that.
Asma, tell us the story behind one of your favorite dishes on the menu at Darjeeling Express. I know many of us may be fasting on this call, and I'm sorry to whet your appetites, but I would love to hear the story of prawn malai curry or some other dish, the story behind it, where you learned the recipe, the taste, the flavors that come to mind as you're cooking.
Well, I apologize to everyone who is fasting. I think that the story of the biryani that I cook is something interesting, because yes. I'd never in my life, I'm typical, child in a family. The biryani I often only saw once it was served out. Never ever seen a deg being opened or been anywhere near the kitchen when it was done. In my sister's wedding, I had to go because the barat had sat down, the bridegroom's family, and there was no biryani. But I watched the biryani being opened, and and Haji Saab, who was my cook, put some grains in my hand and said, "This is your destiny, Asma Baba. This is your destiny." He said, "In your eyes, I see you will become the greatest person."
When was this?
I was 16. I was 16. And that left me, I always remembered that he always told me that, biryanis. So when I wanted to learn how to cook, I went back and I learned to make biryani for 100 people. Wow. No idea that I open a restaurant I don't even know 100 people in the West. But I learned to make for 100 people because I told Haji Saab, one day there will be a space where I'll be serving 100 people. I want to learn to make the wedding biryani. I want to make that biryani where you put the grains on my hand. And I learned that. And today I am known for my biryani. So I do these in my restaurant where the whole restaurant eats biryani. And I tell the story of my family, but I also tell the story of the influence of Islam in India, in our cuisine and our cooking. Often this is something that a lot of people don't know about. But the fact that so much of the Arab and the Persian, with the spice trade came all the techniques. So biryani is a very Indian thing. The word is Persian, of course. But some of the spices that I use, I make a very traditional Calcutta biryani. It has the aloo bukhara, which is the prunes of Bukhara. Right. And so this really kind of gives the stories away. So don't build walls around food. So biryani is also for me very political, because it is a dish that people say belongs to one particular community or people. Don't draw barriers around us. Don't tell us what we are. I will tell you who I am. I will tell you my stories. But do not brandish me, do not label me. And the biryani is the same thing. Mm-hmm. It is a dish of the entire subcontinent. It is from Central Asia to all the way to Qatar. You will find biryani being made. We are a people with shared history, spices, and stories. And so the biryani is very important to me.
Amazing. Asma, there's been a lot written about you, and your story has been told in different ways through different mediums. Share with us something that others don't know about you. What is something that you haven't shared perhaps in the media before, just with your friends here at Concordia? Tell us something about you that you haven't shared before.
I'm an aspiring writer. I write poetry as well, and I want to write stories, not food stories. I want to write stories about women, and so this is my kind of dream. I have already started writing the last week, story inspired by a wall I'd seen that was completely decaying and crumbling, and I've started writing that story. So yeah, I want to write. I want to also read these stories out, because sometimes, you know, stories should be read but also heard, and I think that I want to be a storyteller.
Yes, you are a storyteller, Asma. Let me tell you, you are an amazing storyteller. This has been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us. Thank you for your honesty, your openness. You have such an amazing voice. You have amazing stories to share. It's really been such a pleasure. And I think, let me actually, there's one more question before we have just 1 minute, and let me ask, any ideas on creating a space to encourage younger generations on chefing? I have personal experience coming across younger generations that struggle with their predominantly Asian families that always put the pressure of following typical career paths, doctors and chefs.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I think that, you know, for if you wanted to cook, they said, you know, you want to be a Khansama, they see it the same as manual labor. It is a big problem. It's a huge problem for our community where, you know, this is not seen as a dignified profession. And, you know, the hours are long, and, you know that there's so many stories of bullying. It doesn't help that, you know, you have on television, you know, pictures of tattooed chefs shouting and being abusive to women. It kind of destroys this whole idea of what a kitchen is. Not all kitchens are like that. I think that, you know, children should be allowed to do what they want to do. This is an honorable profession. I try to show that front because I want parents to be less scared of letting their children go into the kitchen. It is very difficult. I don't know. There's no straightforward answer to this, but we all need to think of a way of allowing our children, because otherwise the space will be lost. People like me, once we are gone, we need a whole generation of people to fill up these spaces and to take it forward. And there is a fear that this might not happen.
Asma, thank you. That's our time. Unfortunately, I could speak to you for hours, and I hope we'll continue the conversation another time. But thank you so much for speaking.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Really nice to see you.
Bye.
Thank you again, Asma and Salma, for a wonderful session. I'm afraid we've been battling some technical difficulties in the background, so I'm afraid we're going to have to close the meeting and restart it. If you want to join us for our next session, we'll have Annalise Dodds, Member of Parliament, for a session. But we're going to close the meeting now.